Is Cal OES not gonna, I guess we'll start with trailers. Cal OES isn't on.
To welcome you all, and oh, we got more people coming on. Welcome you all. We wanted to let you know we're broadcasting both on Zoom and we are live on the Mountain View Fire Portal Facebook page. We encourage you, there'll be a Q&A at the end of the workshop, and so you can ask questions in the drop-down Q&A on Zoom or in the comment section on Facebook, and we'll be sure to monitor both of those. And there also is a chat function on Zoom, and so we'll drop links and or references to resources as they come up during our discussion into that chat box. So we encourage you to monitor that as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mono County Supervisor John Peters.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Mountain View Fire Community Workshop, the 6th in the continuing series. I know there's been a gap since our last community workshop. There's also there was sort of a gap in the ability to have predictable information and for certain accurate information on many of the topics of interest, of which we have varying degrees of certainty on varying topics, which Justin is going to cover from the county. Lewis also is here to answer questions. Then we have our Cal OES rep, Dina, is here to give an update from Cal OES. But as you all know, the storm, the big snowstorm, really put us kind of behind the curve. So there was less predictability, and Cal OES has resources spread throughout the state, and they need to coordinate with their contractors, and we'll hear more about that tonight. I know that the first meeting of the Nevada Resiliency Project was successful, and there will be more on that to come tonight. Please ask your questions at any point in time. We will stay on until 6 p.m. to try to address all the questions. But at this point, I think everyone on the screen, Mary Boer, Bob Lawton, Justin Caparuso in the background. We also have April Saul from Community Development, and already mentioned Louis Molina, and Mountain View Fire Director of the EOC, Justin Nalder. So I'd like to turn it over to Justin and let him give you the update, the current update of March 15th.
Thank you, Supervisor Peters. So right now we're just over halfway through the objectives that we came up with for emergency operations and recovery on the Mountain View Fire. For whatever indication that may be worth, we have accomplished quite a bit to date, even though on the ground it may not look like it as much as we would have hoped for. We still are making good progress. So I'm going to go through some of the major lines of work that we've identified and that we're working on. Intermediate housing being the first of those. So a little bit later in the meeting, we'll have a chance to hear from representative from Community Development on their proposed modifications to the temporary emergency dwelling standards. They'll get into a little more detail on how that might affect you if you're looking to live on site and or rebuild. We've got an MOU that's being drafted right now between Mono County and the City of LA. And that's important for our intermediate housing project because we're looking to procure trailers so that families that have been identified through the needs assessment and have been in contact with staff can get matched up with an appropriately sized trailer. And we've got those up here, and all of the liabilities are taken care of. We've also got an MOU that's being drafted with IMACA Inyo Mono Advocates for Community Outreach. Let's see. IMACA, Inyo Mono Advocates for Community Action. They're going to be helping with working with the individuals to take the trailers and to make sure that the families know what they're getting and that they've matched up with the appropriate bin and size. We've got a contract being drafted right now with the transport company that's going to assist bringing these trailers from the city of LA up to Mono County and make sure that they're delivered in a responsible manner. And that's going to help us out because, you know, we've only got so many resources here in the county. We're working to get additional items for those trailers, such as winterization kits and wheel chocks and some of the accessories that go along with it, so that when they get here, they'll be pretty much ready to go. Moving into another line of action for remediation efforts. And I'll start with the landfill transfer station. We've completed our list of projects that goes under public assistance. And so those include many of the items that would be required to get the landfill transfer station back up in action as it was prior to the fire. To date, we've already got the stairway renovation completed. We've replaced the has-waste shed. We've got our compactor engine and compactor itself repaired. Some of the repairs to the larger equipment like the dozer are still underway. Working on maintenance to the culvert sections. And then of course, we're still working on gatehouse replacement, which includes elements of the solar power and the scale electronics. Once all those are in place, we'll move back to our former fee schedule, which is based on weight rather than volume. And to date, we've kind of been using our volume metrics. Along the same train of thought there, we've been working on our road evaluation and maintenance schedule. And that's underway. We kind of expect there's going to be more impacts to the roads out there just because of the heavy loads that'll be going in and out with all of the phase 2 cleanup that will happen. The guardrail replacement project is pretty well done. Many of you will have seen that along East Side Lane. And then the maintenance on the culverts again underway. Phase 1 remediation, which was for has waste. We had a team come through and they made quick work of it. They were able to get through all the properties except for 8. And so just today we had a mobilization of another crew that's going to come out and address the remaining parcels so that all of the phase 1 has been completed before we move into the phase 2. Simultaneously, there's been work for phase 2 going on with site assessments, asbestos assessments, soil samples, looking at potentially dangerous structures and or trees so that they have a good sense of what to expect when they get on site. We'll hear a little bit more about this from Dina when she gets her opportunity to speak as far as the schedule and expectations. Right now, we've got 94 site assessments that have been completed. We've got 87 asbestos assessments that have been completed, and the state has 98 of the right of entry forms that they've received. And I'll tell you that we've got a couple of more in-house that we've approved that I should have gone through prior to this, but we'll get in, and that'll put our number just up over 100. Over the weekend, we had a one-day swap. We switched our normal operation day from Saturday to Sunday. And as many of you know, the funeral for Sally Joseph was ongoing. And so we wanted to allow our gate attendant to participate in that. This was just a one-time swap. We're back onto our regular Wednesday, Saturday operational hours. Wanted to make quick mention about the open application period for trailers. We've gotten a lot of calls in recently with people inquiring about the trailers and how to get them. The the open and assessment period for that has come and gone. That's pretty well closed for now. Hopefully you've had your opportunity to relay your needs. If something has changed and you now have a need that you didn't have before, still call in and talk to us and we'll see what we can come up with. But didn't want to give this faulty expectation that this was open and ongoing. We really completed our assessments and have tried to match up the needs with the resources to date. A note about the donation center, which is in the community center right now. They've been doing a fantastic job. I hope many of you have taken advantage of what they have inside of there and gotten the supplies that you may be needing. But a note on that, as of the end of March 31st, that operation will be wrapping up and they'll be moving to a new location, staging up at Camp Antelope for a short while before they take those resources on and donate them elsewhere. We heard mention of the Nevada Resiliency Project. There was a workshop. The first workshop was held, very well attended. Again, I hope most of you took advantage of that if you were available to do so. But if not, the second one's coming up on March 20th. And more details about that will be posted forthcoming on the Mountain View Fire portal. And Justin Caparuso is going to be the one that'll have more details if you need those. I would say with that, that's probably the update that I've got for you right now. And I will hand it back. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. And Justin will be remaining on this call for questions. But let's turn it right over to Dina, next up on the agenda with Cal OES.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for having me and allowing me to participate in this meeting. So Justin gave a great job of overview of what we've been able to accomplish thus far. So most of the site assessments for the properties that have been affected by the Mountain View fire have been assessed. We're now working our way through doing asbestos assessments and abatement. Next usually comes with chimney crews. Chimney tipping crews are going to be in the area, followed by debris crews. We anticipate at this point in time, weather permitting, that we will have debris crews that will drop Monday or Wednesday of next week. So that will be exciting. So the residents will expect to see a lot of trucks in the area, a lot of trucks actually over the next coming weeks. So we'll be working with the stakeholders here on this phone call to make sure if there are any traffic concerns, we can address those sooner rather than later for the residents that are still in the area. So we'll be working with all of you to make sure that you understand. I do want to point out a couple of things. When you do see our contractors in the area, and that includes anybody that's basically working for the state on the debris removal project, they're going to have one of these little signs that's going to be either in the windshield of their car or on this, their vehicle, or on the side of their truck, so that you know that they're working for the state on this project. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware. If you do not see this, they are not likely to be working for the state. I know that we have had in other counties questions between private contractors and state contractors, and so we want to make sure that all of our staff are fully visible and are decorated and somehow with either the company logo that they work for the state, or again, one of these placards. So just want to provide that to the community members. Additionally, just wanted to hit the highlights of the phase 2 debris operation so the community has a chance to understand the different phases that go through within, different stages that go through within phase 2 program. So as Justin and I mentioned, we've gone through the first 2 of about 8 steps in the debris removal project. Most of the time, folks just think that it's just like the big bulldozers come in and then you're done. But there's actually quite a few steps. So I'm going to run through this real quickly. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards. So we have the site assessments. We have the asbestos assessments and abatement. You have chimney tipping. Then we go through and do the actual debris removal, which is removing a lot of the ash debris, metal, concrete from a property. Then we'll do soil sampling to make sure that we have cleared all of the hazardous ash and debris from the property within the ash footprint. Erosion control if it's necessary. a tree assessment to see if there are any trees that might pose a hazard to the public rights of way. And then finally, once all of that is been cleared and taken, has been cleared and completed, then we will go through the property, make sure that we've done everything that we said that we are going to do, and we sign it off and return it back to the county to return to the homeowner. Those are just the basic steps. I want to make sure that that the folks or the community members are aware that you can look on the public dashboard and keep track of your properties, of what stage that you might be in within that phase 2 debris removal program. And I'll provide the link to either Justin or actually either Justin Halter or Justin Caparuso, and perhaps we can put it in the chat so that the community members are aware of where they can keep track of their properties within the process. And as always, you can reach out to us directly, and we can try to work with you on what the status of those properties are. So those are the basics. I didn't know, Justin, or either Justin, if there was any other specific thing. Like I said, the biggest news is weather permitting. We do expect to have debris crews in the area come next week, and they'll start to trickle in. And within about a 2-week period, you'll start to see a significant number of trucks in the area to actually do it. Mostly that has to do with the fact that the landfills that we need to go to are some distance away, so we don't want to slow down the process. So there will be a lot of traffic in the area, and so we really want to make sure that the community is aware that we will have a lot of trucks in the area, and if that does, provide any impacts to the community, we'll work with the county to minimize those as much as possible. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Dina. Just so to follow up, the link to the portal is the very first item in the chat. And so if you scroll down on the portal, you can get to that dashboard.
Fantastic. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate that. And then, of course, I will be around to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dina. And I know if they don't get posed by members of the community, I have a few. But first, we're going to go to Mary and get if there's any additional update on the temporary housing, trailers or others.
So good evening, everyone. As Justin mentioned, the application period has been closed. If for some reason your circumstances has changed and you are in need of a trailer at this point, you need to reach out to us as soon as possible. And we've contacted everyone on our list that had already said they were interested in a trailer. So if you're thinking you're getting a trailer and we haven't called you, you need to reach out. And that's kind of a 2-step process. We update the needs assessment, and then we kind of have a conversation about the trailer agreements that we would be asking for. We need to get this finalized because we cannot finalize the agreement with the city of LA without the VIN numbers of the trailers. So we don't want to hold it up for everyone by continuing to leave it open. So this week is kind of when staff intends on finalizing that list so we can move this forward. And with that, I'm going to ask April to go over the changes that community development is asking the board to make tomorrow on the temporary emergency dwelling permit. And this is based on what they've heard from the property owners in terms of the process. So April?
Yeah, good evening. April from Community Development. I just wanted to give a quick summary about the proposed changes going before the Board of Supervisors tomorrow. Essentially for the temporary emergency dwelling unit, or TED as we're calling it, there was previously a stipulation that a building permit would need to be submitted within 18 months of the trailer essentially moving on site. And there's a proposal going before the board to extend that timeline up to 3 years. And if that is accepted, then that will be the new time frame for submitting a complete building package. We understand that there is a shortage of contractors, and it's obviously posing a delay for everyone to get their submittals and get estimates on timelines. So we are proposing to extend that timeline. From the time of a building permit submittal, there's an additional 3-year time period for construction and completion to wrap up of the proposed new residence. So essentially extending those timelines, and then if there are additional extenuating circumstances, an individual can always contact our community development director or the building permit official, the building official for Mono County, to ask for additional extensions depending on the circumstances of the parcel and the permit. So that is essentially the proposal being made tomorrow. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Thank you, April. And again, this is to provide flexibility and be nimble to the needs of the community. And like April said, the challenges that are not only for Antelope Valley, but for California and much of the country that is trying to build anything with construction costs and resources being spread thin. But with that was the last presentation that we had scheduled, and hopefully it answered a lot of your questions. Do we have any direct questions, Justin Caparuso?
We do. We have a few on our Facebook page, and I'll go down the list. If we are able to put one of the trailers on our property, how will we get power, septic, and water going again?
I can jump in with that, and Lewis and others can help out. So in order to get restoration of
April is having some technical difficulties. She kind of alerted us to that with some connectivity. But I've also received not only the concerns of how are you going to get those services, but how will they be maintained, specifically the sewer, what happens to the wastewater. So maybe Lewis can talk about that, and well, hopefully April will come back.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lewis Molina. Yeah, basically what we're looking at is all of these homes already have a well and a septic system on them, on those properties. So the idea, ideally, would be to get the trailer that's placed on the property in a location where it can access both of those facilities. So the water would be probably less of an issue in that you can run a water line, to various locations to get the water close to the trailer so you can hook into it. The septic system, ideally what we'd like to do is see the trailer placed in close proximity to the septic tank so you can, basically plumb into what's left of your sewer line or close to the septic tank so you can plumb into your sewer line and use your septic system. So part of the cleanup process will be identifying, part of the phase 2 process is identifying the location of the septic tanks, making sure they're in good operating order, that they get pumped and that they're functional. So once we can show that, you'll go ahead and be able to use that septic tank. I would assume in a worst case scenario where you can't get close to the septic tank because of the phase 2 program, while they're doing the debris removal anyway, you may have to be on another location on your property. In that case, there's alternatives where you can have a pumper truck company come by and pump the trailers just like they would in a campground. They provide that service pretty regularly around the area. So we'll look into those alternatives if necessary and see how we can get that worked out. And then again, the water wells, shouldn't be any problems with the water wells. Obviously, a lot of the electrical has been burned up, so we have to get the wells functional, which would mean once you get power to your property, we can go ahead and get the wells evaluated by a pump company, and shouldn't be any problems with your pumps. I mean, maybe there'd be some cases that are where you might have some damage, but I think generally speaking, the pump should be fine. So we'll get those up and running, get some water samples taken to make sure you have potable water, bacteriologically, the water quality is fine. And your wells and septic systems hopefully will serve those trailers that you bring onto the property.
Thanks, Lewis. I don't know if Jason has any additional items or comments to add, but I did promote him so he could chime in if needed.
Not too much, very much what Lewis was saying. We consistently allow for temporary dwellings during construction without any sort of intact utilities. So as long as there's those services provided, like Lewis said, whether it's a pump truck, water delivery, that's pretty much acceptable. It'll be up to the owner and the builder to deal with that. So, but hopefully within short period of time, we'll be able to get those utilities back up and running again.
Thanks, Jason. Sorry for surprising you like that.
No worries.
Next question on Facebook. How is the scheduling process going to work? Do you just start on one street and continue until they're all done? Or do you work on total losses, partial loss first? So Dina, that's a question for you.
I was going to say, I think that's a question directed towards me. So generally speaking, we try to group the streets together. So that since we've had time from the end of the right of entry form deadline, we are able to actually schedule the groups because it makes our operations go a lot more efficiently. So we try to complete all of the properties that are within a particular area before we move on to the next. And we'll have somewhere in the neighborhood between 6 to 8 crews working in any one particular area. So it's about right. We try to finish everything that is scheduled on the street first before we move on to the next property.
Great, thanks, Tina.
I might add just a little bit more to that. We did come up with a priority list that we submitted to Cal OES for particular properties that might be of a greater potential environmental hazard and or getting some of the utilities back online. So those will likely be addressed up front, and then they will start on one end and go to the other.
Yeah, so even in priority properties, we would complete the properties that are within that area. We wouldn't do those first and come back. So even within those, the ones that are near the riverbank, we would complete them all at the same time.
And while we're on this subject that you're both discussing right now, we have another question. Who would someone contact if they wanted to kind of learn more about when and or if they could adjust their timeline on that schedule?
I don't know that we can adjust a timeline, so it kind of depends on the specifics. So right now I don't have a specific schedule of every property, so I can't say that property at 120 Main Street is going to be completed like April 20th. There's not a schedule like that. There's a lot of factors that go into scheduling properties, so we know where we're going to start. We know generally where we're going to be about a week out, but there are a number of different factors that can change that schedule. And that can be anywhere where you may think it's only going to take you 2 days to clear a property, and you get there and you find something that's extremely challenging and it takes 3 or 4 days to complete. That then pushes back the properties that are behind it for that particular crew. So it's something to keep in mind. You can, again, follow along on that public dashboard so you can keep track of that. We do have our contractors will actually give you a call about a week out to let you know that we'll be in your particular area in a week's time. And then again, 24 to 48 hours before we arrive on your property. And that's also to allow the homeowners some time if they'd like to be on the property. When I say be on the property, be near the property when we're doing debris removal. The owners are more than welcome to do that. We do ask that they stay back outside of our exclusion zone for their safety, for the safety of our crew. But they are more than welcome to be there when we're actually doing debris operations.
Great, thanks, Tina. We have a question in the chat here on Zoom related to the trailers. What if I want the trailer, but I do not want to take delivery for 6 to 12 months?
We don't necessarily have the capacity to store the trailers for that period of time. We do understand that people might not have their property ready right away. They could site the trailer in an RV park on an interim basis and then move it when they're ready to put it on their property. But we we don't have the capacity to store these for an indeterminate period of time.
Can they be temporarily stored, or if someone takes delivery and it's not used, if it's left on their property? Or can we find that out?
I believe they could, if they take ownership of it and then don't use it right away, our agreements don't speak to that. So I don't think that would be an issue, but we don't have the capacity to store it in the interim.
Okay, and we could work with Mr. Johnson to get more further details on his specific issues with the trailer, as we will with anybody who has specific needs and issues. So feel free to just continue outside of our community meetings, these community workshops, to get your questions posed. Let us go to work and answer them, and hope to resolve the issues and the concerns that each individual will likely have, unique challenges and opportunities. And I did see something earlier that somebody was asking, are there going to be properties that did not opt into an ROE that will remain in a non-cleaned up state? What happens if somebody didn't opt in and they choose and they don't do it themselves? What happens to those properties?
I can speak to that. Actually, we're going to, there is an item on the board agenda tomorrow regarding an ordinance for debris removal. And the ordinance, in essence, says that the properties will be cleaned up, and they're going to be cleaned up either through the ROE program, through the state, or through an alternative program administered by the county, which has basically the same requirements as the state debris removal program. It's just for folks who, for one reason or another, decided in their instance, they did not want to enter into the state debris removal program. So it'll be removed via one of those two mechanisms. For properties where people just do not clean up clean up the debris from their property, it would have to go through another cleanup process that would be administered via the county, and those costs would be recovered from the property owner or assessed to the property. One way or the other, those properties will be cleaned up.
Thank you, Louis. Next question.
Is it possible to salvage a driveway or sidewalk? Will everything be removed?
Good question. Generally speaking, driveways will not be taken or sidewalks will not be taken unless they pose a hazard. So if they're sticking up and they pose a safety hazard, they may be taken, but we do try to leave driveways and sidewalks, but concrete slabs, foundations of homes are taken.
The FAQs have some contradictory information regards to rebuilding, higher fees, rebuilding on the exact footprint. It looks like there's some contradicting information they're finding on our current FAQs, and they want to know, when do we think the different departments will consolidate exemptions, waivers, and permit information with accurate information?
I will defer to if somebody has specific contradictory information that they'd like to bring to our attention. Each individual department can address their own department. It's been the intent to consolidate the FAQs with all of the departmental waivers, exemptions, fee expectations, permitting, but again, I know specific properties have specific questions and needs on the rebuild, and it's best to contact directly community development or myself, and I can forward your concerns or get them addressed. Jason Davenport is on the call, but if we can drill down into some of what those contradictory terms are. I mean, I know it's new for a lot of you. This is not a process that many of you have ever gone through. Just the building aspect of it, not the fire part of it, but the idea is to be as flexible and to provide the opportunity to be able to rebuild on your properties. But when it comes to specific footprints, changes in square footage, consolidating buildings, I've had a lot of those individual calls and requests, and always I defer them to the experts in our on our county staff to address them specifically as you proceed in your planning of how to rebuild on your properties. And so if you can, someone has a specific question right now on this meeting, I mean, we have some folks here that might be able to answer them, but the concept as a whole is, as I stated, we're trying to make the path as feasible as possible for everyone.
Hey, John, I'd like to bring up, it's very possible that some people believe that departments might include the school district and local fire districts, and they do not. They're not under the jurisdiction of community development and the building department. They have their own fees and own waivers that we don't have any say over. So it's very possible that that's what they're referring to, but until we get details, we're just guessing.
Thank you, Jason. And we can connect you directly with representatives of those special districts, but they are governmental entities in and of themselves. And the intent, though, is to not create any barriers, and in fact, to break down the barriers that we become aware of to the rebuild effort.
So Mary is seeing some Facebook messages that I'm not. It looks like my computer's loading slowly. So Mary, do you want to pull up one of those questions?
So there was a question asked about contacting Liberty to put power on the property in the process, and another fire survivor has actually answered that question and put a number on here. So I'm going to put the number in the chat. According to him, Liberty has been directed by supervisors to move quickly to restore services to the community. Normal time frame for non-fire losses is 3 weeks, so expect something less than that to restore. And I'm going to put that number in the chat for those of you who are watching on directly on Zoom. We've heard that Liberty's an issue for a lot of people, so I think a lot of you will be interested in this information. And thank you, Ben, for sharing what you've learned on that. In addition, there are a couple of questions on the Facebook chat that I'm really not sure what the person's asking, and so we'll reach out directly to that person. He's talking about, well, I'll ask one of them, and it might be for Cal OES. How much longer do they have to get stuff off the property? I'm assuming they want to potentially remove some things before debris removal. So what would be the answer for that, Dina?
So if they want to remove anything else from the property, I'd say to do it sooner rather than later, certainly before our crews arrive. Since we've already done site assessments and asbestos abatement for, it looks like, about 90% of the property, now is the time for the homeowners to go through and remove any items. I would caution them not to move the debris within that ash footprint, disturb it significantly so it doesn't make them ineligible for the program. Don't go through and sweep off your concrete foundation, put debris in piles, things of that nature. If there's something that you're looking for that you haven't been able to find, when the contractor gives you a call and say, hey, we're going to be on your property in a couple of days you can let them know what it is you're looking for. They will go through and try to, if you tell them where you think that it might have been located, they will try to go through and sift through in proper protective gear to see if they can locate it and return it to the owner. But now would be the time. Since we are going to drop debris crews in the next week, now this week would be really about the last time they should be able to be on the property.
Great, thank you, Dina. And then Mr. Brooks, your question about trailers, I'm not sure what you're asking. So if you can either clarify on Facebook, or I did put my email in the chat. It's mboer@mono.ca.gov if you want to send that specific question on trailers.
And Mary, that question came in super early, so I think it was basically just, are we going to address trailers?
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that he's not left with, if he has a question, please reach out.
We have another question for Dina regarding, there's a concrete porch separate from the foundation. Can this be left? My parents are concerned the concrete block porch will be removed.
It's hard to be able to make an assessment without actually seeing it myself. So I would actually have to take a look at what the assessment is to determine whether or not that could be saved. It would depend on a number of factors, including whether or not that concrete porch acted as like a retaining wall to the property and it held up slope stability, depending on where it's at. So it's hard to determine that. Generally speaking, most concrete has been destabilized in a fire of this magnitude, and so it's not considered structurally safe anymore. That's generally the position of the state, but again, I'd have to take a look at it before I could make an actual determination. And that's something you can certainly have a discussion with the contractor when they give you a call, and you can ask them about that, and they're happy to walk you through that process and what their assessment is of it.
Thanks, Tina. What about vacant burnt land around our lot? Will there be cleanup there?
Generally, we do not clean up vacant burnt land. So if it just has vegetation burned on a vacant land, there's no structural debris on it or any qualifying structure that is part of the program, we do not clean that up. If on your particular parcel you have a residential structure, let's say you have a couple of outbuildings, a shed, a barn, a garage that weren't attached to the structure, those were burnt and destroyed as well. That is something that we will clean up. If you had burnt out vehicles on that particular parcel, we will clean that up. The qualifying factor is whether or not you have a structure that qualifies for debris removal. That's usually about 120 square feet in diameter. So, and then we generally clean up the rest of what's on that property.
Thank you. I don't have any further pending or open questions on Zoom, and it looks like my Facebook is back up and running, and I don't see any pending on there either at this point.
Okay, so I want to relay a concern and sort of try to put myself in the mindset of many of our residents in the valley, whether they were directly impacted by fire on their parcel or not. Many people, most people that have chosen to live in the Antelope Valley and Mono County and our general area really have an appreciation for the wildlife, for what occurs naturally outside of development, which is migration of wildlife. It's deer migration time. And we're going to have a lot of activity, a lot of potential impacts to the valley with the moving of debris and the trucks. And I know that there should be a heightened awareness with the construction crews about this. And I know things that have changed is, and somebody mentioned, what happens to a property that's burned, but it's next to mine. The landscape and the ability for wildlife to determine migration habits and patterns may be impacted. So things like fence flagging, there may be some, I don't know that it's totally unique to everywhere else, but certainly I want to make sure that these factors are considered and that either U.S. Fish and Wildlife, California Department of Fish and Wildlife have the opportunity to participate in whatever way will not hinder the recovery, but to enhance the ability for all of the natural resources to continue to thrive in the Antelope Valley. And it's not necessarily a question, but I think it needs to be, we need to stay aware of that. And also, how would somebody, if somebody has a concern related to specifically the Cal OES debris removal or the independent contractors, what is the mechanism for them to address those concerns? Will there be any unique phone numbers or ways to report these things? Because it's inevitable. I mean, there will be people that are going to feel impacted adversely, whether they're impacted directly by being a fire victim or not. So I just want to make sure that those lines of communication, that if something's happening on a Friday afternoon and someone feels that concern needs to be addressed sooner than later, I put my contact information in the chat, which I would encourage anybody to contact me directly, but typically that ultimately gets referred to somebody, to an expert, to somebody that can address the concern. So I really like, Dina, the placard that you showed everybody earlier. Maybe you could show everybody that again. And so everybody should be looking for that. And I don't know if we have a message board like we had during the initial phase 1 portion, where right on 395 or at the general store, contact whomever if you have a concern. But I just, it's going to be a lot, and it's going to be a lot all at once. And I want to make sure that we're very sensitive to everybody in the valley and don't hinder or impede the recovery, but address those concerns. And so anyways, if anyone has any comments on that, great.
If you don't mind, if I could, oh, I'm sorry. If I could respond to a couple of those, is that okay, Louis?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so just because you put them out there, and I want to make sure that the community is well aware. We actually do, as part of our debris removal program, consult all state agencies that would require an environmental review. It's called an environmental protection plan. It includes the California State National Resources Agency, Cal EPA, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Toxic Substance Control, the Water Board, DWR, all agencies that have anything to do basically with our natural environment to determine when we are doing debris removal operations, where do we need to mitigate our operations to basically not impact the environment. And that includes your migration, your waterways, anything of that nature. So while we do have operations currently going on in 30 counties, every county can be different. So right now, like for instance, in LA, we have to make some considerations around Joshua trees. They are a potential candidate for an endangered species. And so we have to mitigate our operations around that. Or any operations that are around waterways. If you have debris around a waterway, depending on the type of waterway that is classified, we will actually mitigate how we do that debris removal so that when we leave, that waterway is pretty much what it was before that fire happened. Same goes for endangered species, any species that are around the neighborhood. We also have protocols for when we come across, which did happen earlier in our operations, a den of rattlesnakes. And so we do make protocols, and we do have biologists, archaeologists, and other environmental folks that are on our team that actually do go through the area before our crews drop, during when our crews drop, and when we notice something specifically. So actually this particular week, I thank you for bringing it up because I did not mention it earlier. We actually do have our environmental and historic preservation team on the ground taking a look at the priority areas that Justin mentioned earlier. To determine on what mitigation measures that we need to do in order to lessen the impact to those areas. So wanted to put the community and yourself at ease that we do take that into consideration, and we do consult a number of different experts to ensure that we are adhering to all state and federal guidelines where necessary, even though we are in the middle of an emergency. I think the second thing you mentioned was, how does somebody reach out if they have questions or concerns about either a consultant, contractor, the state, etc. Obviously, we'd like it to go through the county first because you know your residents most, but they have a direct line to myself. I believe I can put my contact information in there, but they're free to reach out to myself and my deputy, Nick Crisosto. If they have questions or concerns about anything that has to do with our operation, we do, depending on the question or concern, we will address those, regardless of whether it's Friday at 4:59, because we do actually work Monday through Saturday on all of our operations, and I do take phone calls even on Sunday at all hours of the night at times. So we are here to work for the residents. and the disaster survivors, as well as the community, to ensure that they are able to recover soon, as soon as possible. And that's my job to make sure that that gets done. And I think I missed your last question. I apologize, or your last statement. I wanted to make sure I covered that all, but I think Lewis was next. Maybe you can fill in the blank.
No, I just wanted to add. Go ahead. Oh, I just wanted to add that, yeah, if there's any problems out there that you see, any concerns, questions, I don't mind being the intermediary, if you will, or clearinghouse. And certainly I may not have the answer, or I may not be the right agency, but I can certainly relay your question or concern to the right person. So feel free to contact Louis Molina, the health department. My email and my phone number is on the top of those ROE forms. I'll put it down here again. And I do get those messages on the weekends as well. So I can get back to you in very short notice.
And again, I will add my contact information to make sure that that's available for the community as well.
We have a question related to insurance on Facebook. The insurance company wanted to know if we are going to take the full amount they allotted for debris removal, or will it be according to work done? Does this make sense? They wanted to send someone out to estimate cleanup, and I told them we opted into the state removal.
It does make sense. So it depends on the insurance company, it depends on your policy. So generally speaking, and I want to make sure I'm very clear when I'm talking about generalities here, the state generally will only take what is left over from the project. So just as an example, let's say your insurance policy allows for like $15,000 for debris removal. There are items that are not eligible for the state program that you may need to use individually as part of your recovery efforts. So let's say, for sake of example, you needed to take to remove something that we don't remove, and I'm blanking off the top of my head of what that would be, but let's just say something didn't qualify, and that took about $5,000, save your receipts. The state would then only come around and collect up to $10,000, what remained. We would not then take the full $15,000. So you need to go back and work with your insurance agent to determine what is eligible within your program that you could use for debris removal, and then what is eligible for our program and what we would end up taking. Use part of your proceeds for things that we would not cover, so that you can maximize your ability to recover sooner rather than later. I hope that answered the question articulately enough.
Thanks, Tina. We have a raised hand. I'm going to go ahead and actually, it might be a question here. Do waterways include irrigation ditches?
They can, depending on how they are actually classified and categorized. So that's where we work with the local water district and any of the other agencies that I mentioned previously. So irrigation ditches can include that. It depends on how they're set up. We will generally make bridges over a lot of culverts, but it depends on what we're talking about. But we mitigate those and try to basically return them to what they would have been prior to the disaster as much as possible, to not change the course of the water, etc.
And then, Dina, would there be a list of contractors hired that are the state hires available for made public? Is that going to be on the website?
So on CalRecycle's website, they do have a list of the contract that is available. It's a public document. And for this particular operation, Arcadis and Fortune are the consultant, the contractor that are working on it. They may have subs. I do not believe that they list those subs. So I don't know that that information per se is available. But again, if somebody has a particular interest, we can try to figure that out offline if there's a specific question they would like to know.
Thank you. This question, Zachary, perhaps you can clarify. So per the last RPAC meeting, Wendy related that specific concerns as well as many other issues that have arisen are going to be addressed to the board. How long will this process take? Example, will a metal building built prior to primary structure built? This is an issue for at least 3 residents here with total loss.
I can speak, I think, briefly to that. So the item going before the board tomorrow is specifically related to timelines of building permits in relation to a temporary emergency dwelling unit, and the time you have to submit your building permit, and then the time you have to construct your permanent residence. I believe the item that the individual is referring to is there is currently a general plan requirement that if you're building a structure that is not your primary residence, and you're trying to build that before the primary residence, that requires what's called a director review permit normally. And there's currently nothing going before the board about that specific issue. If the supervisors or residents want to request that, we can talk about that offline, but that is not part of the package that's going before the board tomorrow.
Thanks, April. I don't see any further questions on Facebook. Looking through the chat.
In the Q&A, there was a question about the dust and dirt that is and will continue to migrate throughout the valley during the winds that are inevitable. And so what is the role of the county in keeping ditches, like Dina said, that were basically in a state where water can travel in the manner that it did prior to the fire?
I'm not sure if that's a question for me or if that's a question for the county. So for our state operations to help control dust in general and ash and debris sort of flying around when you have heavy winds, but just in general for operations, we do have water tenders on site to reduce the dust so that you don't have ash and debris like flying around during our operations. I don't know, I'd have to see something specific as it relates to having water in irrigation canals, on whether or not you have debris in there, where the debris necessarily came from. If it's coming off of a residential parcel, then we can flag that for high priority if we need to remove that, if it's right next to a residential parcel, but I'd have to have a little bit more specifics before I could answer that with any degree of confidence. But I'm happy to work with you on that.
Okay, and maybe CEO Lawton and Justin Nalder, you guys can make some notes there so that we can let the entire valley know. I mean, the dust will travel far and wide, and of course, these irrigation ditches deliver water for the important agriculture that occurs throughout the valley. And potentially our Ag Commissioner, Nate Reed, could enter this conversation, but we will bring more information back on that. Any last minute questions? Literally, it's a minute to go.
We just got a similar question around the fees, and it looks like conversation with Mike Curdy and the fire chief. They wish to align fire fees with school district fees, and I know we sort of already addressed this. And that's the last question I have in here, and we are running up right at the hour.
Okay.
Yeah. So oh, go ahead.
Add to that, two people have asked in formal requests, Dina, for the state of, yes, they do want the list of contractors. Somebody's requested that on Facebook. And then if you could also get us a list of the kinds of things that the state might not remove that would be from that other part of insurance that they could do separately. We have a homeowner requesting that information too.
So the items that are would not be removed is the list of items that is removed is usually included in the right of entry form. So it should be listed there. Yeah. So they can refer back to the right of entry form to determine what the state will and will not remove. And then it's a matter of working with their insurance agent on what else is eligible for debris removal under that insurance policy to determine how best they can use that policy.
Great. Thank you.
And with that, I saw one more question that was already addressed earlier in the meeting about what happens to a property that is neglected and not opted into the program or self removed. And this is recorded, but we will not leave properties derelict long-term as a county. The last thing I just want to do is say thank you to everybody who's participating and the healthy conversation and questions. We are trying to determine when the best next time will be to have community workshop number 7. So we'll be sharing that information shortly. And tomorrow there is a Mountain View Fire item, as there is on every Board of Supervisors meeting. And with that item, an opportunity for the public to ask questions and raise concerns. And there will also be a Mountain View Fire item in the near future on the RPAC agendas. So with that, I will say thank you to everybody for participating. Look forward to this process getting a accelerated jump start. And with that, we will say good night. Thank you.